Welcome to Movie Slice. Quick fun recaps of your favorite movies. Sharp, funny, and to the point. Hit subscribe and get your perfect slice of cinema. The story of Case 1, Model Child Creepshow, begins with a black and white film that still relied on dialogue boxes because it had no audio. We see a girl tied up on top of a ritual table. Suddenly, a character who strongly resembles Indiana Jones enters the scene. The woman asks how he found her, and the man says he just followed a trail of corpses. He starts to untie her when he's attacked by a kind of mummy that throws him to the ground. The man recovers and pulls out a revolver, firing several shots in succession at the monster, which doesn't react at all. The creature grabs him and throws him again against the wall, along with the girl who had freed herself. Just as the mummy is about to attack again, a kind of humanoid fish appears, and the two start fighting. Suddenly, everything freezes as we hear a woman's voice calling for JoJo. We see a boy dressed as Dracula painting some monsters in his room. His mother, June, arrives and asks what he was doing because she'd been calling him for a while. The boy apologizes, saying he was busy finishing painting the monster. His mother tells him that his Aunt Barb has arrived. The little boy asks, a bit annoyed, if Uncle Kevin came too, and his mother replies yes. The two go downstairs and sit at the table for dinner. At the table, his uncle says Halloween is only in October, but his mother explains that in that house it's always Halloween, and asks if JoJo wants juice. The little vampire jokes, saying he doesn't drink juice because he's dressed as Dracula, but Kevin quickly asks why he doesn't drink juice if it was the first thing astronauts drank on the moon. Barb explains that the boy is just playing because he loves everything horror-related, to which his uncle says it's all garbage. Joe asks to leave the table, and the man says he doesn't care, but his mother stops him, saying his aunt and uncle have a request to make. His aunt asks JoJo if he'd mind if they stayed for a while to help his mother, who's going through a tough time. The boy doesn't answer and just runs off to his room, leaving everyone at the table awkward. While removing his makeup, his mother arrives at the door saying it's all wrong because Dracula can't see himself in the mirror. She goes to the boy and helps clean his face. As she wipes his eye, the boy lets out a groan, making her realize he's hiding a black eye. She asks who did it, and the two sit on the bed. The woman asks JoJo not to talk about monsters at school anymore because he's running out of friends, but the boy replies that he already has all the friends he wants, referring to the monsters in his room. After that, the boy asks his mother why his aunt and uncle are moving in. The woman explains it's just until she finishes chemotherapy, and that it's good because Uncle Kevin needs to get back on his feet. The boy calls the man a loser, and his mother laughs, changing the subject and asking what they'll watch on the time machine, telling him to put on a movie while she makes popcorn. As soon as she leaves the room, she starts coughing up blood, and then we see the two watching a black and white movie. JoJo asks June why she calls the projector the time machine, and she replies that it's because the movie transports them to different eras and moments, like remembering who she was with when she saw her first horror movie. The boy says he was with his mother, and she continues, saying that whenever he turns on that machine, she'll be with him no matter what, and that they'll always be together. Time passes, and when the movie ends, JoJo sees June unconscious. He nudges and calls her, but she doesn't respond. The boy then lies down sadly on his deceased mother's lap. The next thing we see is the woman's funeral. We see everyone leaving one by one, leaving only the little boy. 3 months later, his aunt is tidying up the garden when Kevin arrives, asking about JoJo. Barb says she let him sleep in because it's Saturday, but the man says it's cleaning day, and he must have been watching horror garbage. The woman asks him to be nicer, but the man says the boy is becoming a weirdo and is being encouraged to do so. Kevin goes to the boy's room, opens the door, and asks if the boy is sniffing glue, but Joe says he's fixing one of his action figures. The man enters the room and says he knows what the boy has, and starts looking for adult entertainment magazines under his bed, only to find a Creepshow comic as a nice reference, and says he's disappointed because at his age he should be into girls. Next, he says that he knows JoJo doesn't like him, but his cousin Gary didn't like him either, because what he does is turn boys into men, and that's what he's going to do with JoJo. He says the first step is to take away everything horror-related from his room. The boy asks why, and the man explains that he would because he wanted to, and it was very difficult to have to move to that house. JoJo says that he knows they had moved after his uncle lost his job, which irritates Kevin, who grabs the toy from the boy's hand and breaks it, kicking it right after. The man says he wants the boy helping downstairs right away, and leaves. While he was tidying up the garden, a teenager on a skateboard passes by. asking Jojo to send a kiss to his mother. Right after, this young man bumps into Frankenstein, who lifts him into the air and breaks his neck, calling Joe his friend. When Joe snaps out of it, we see it was all just the child's imagination. His aunt appears on the porch offering him juice. She asks why he wasn't dressed as a vampire, and he says it was because of the sun. Looking down, Joe notices a hand mark on his aunt's arm, but she changes the subject, saying it was her fault for not warning she would be working overtime. And Kevin said it was getting harder and harder to be a man. The boy says his uncle wasn't a man. One day, while Barb was ironing clothes and Kevin was watching a fight, the phone rings and the woman answers. She calls her husband because it's his boss on the line. The man answers all excited, thinking he's going to be called back to work, but we see all the joy drain from his face after he gets the news that he won't be hired anymore. Worried about her husband, the woman forgets the hot iron on top of one of his shirts. After that, we see Kevin opening the front door. He goes out with a wooden box full of JoJo's toys, saying there wouldn't be any more monsters in that house. The boy shouts that the only monster there was him, and his uncle gives him a hard slap in the face, knocking him to the ground. His aunt lies on top of the boy and asks Kevin to back off, but he raises his hand to her, asking what the two of them were going to do, and kicks the trash can. As soon as the man goes inside, the boy gets up and goes to the trash to get his things. At night, Joe cries holding a photo of June, saying he misses her, when suddenly the projector turns on. He turns off the device and lies down, but the projector turns on again, showing his mother's grave. We see the woman crawling out like a zombie. This is even a reference to the cover of the movie Night of the Living Dead from 1968, with the same bluish coloring. She says through a speech bubble that she and JoJo's friends were taking care of the boy. She slowly approaches, handing a Creepshow magazine to the boy, which comes out of the screen and materializes in reality. The boy wakes up scared and looks to the side at his Creepshow comic, seeing an ad for a voodoo doll called The Victim, where he writes his uncle's name. One day while walking down the street, a boy knocks the magazine out of JoJo's hand, and when JoJo bends down to pick it up, he is approached by a mailman who gives him a package. JoJo runs home, and upon opening it, finds the Victim package. He opens the wrapping and assembles the doll. Downstairs, Kevin opens the fridge when suddenly his ankle twists completely backwards, making him howl in pain, and we see that it was Joe who twisted the doll's foot. He puts his uncle's foot back to normal. Barb arrives at that moment but doesn't see anything. Kevin gets up completely terrified and hears the boy's laughter throughout the house, but ignores it and leaves limping. Later that same night, Barb goes to the boy's room and tells him she's going to work and asks him to stay away from his uncle. He's been in bed all day burning with fever. She approaches the boy and says things will get better, but he says he knows that. As soon as the woman leaves the room, the boy looks to the side and we see he put the doll on top of the heater. Later, the man is in bed when he hears several noises and music. He yells, asking for it to be turned down. Kevin gets up and says the boy needs a spanking. Looking around his room, we notice the walls seem to be dripping blood. He grabs a baseball bat and goes to the boy's room, saying if he doesn't open up, he'll break the door down. The door opens immediately and Kevin is startled to see a sea monster. The creature attacks, throwing the man down the stairs. A man dressed as a vampire tells viewers to keep an eye out because the conclusion of Uncle Kevin versus the monster is about to happen. At that moment, the creature breaks the door and throws the man across the room. We see JoJo holding the doll, and as soon as the creature grabs his uncle's leg, he crushes the doll's leg. Kevin screams in pain and asks the boy to tell his friends he's sorry. The mummy appears at the top of the stairs and grabs the man's head, while the sea creature holds his legs. The boy asks if his uncle is ready for his conclusion. What we hear next are sounds of flesh tearing and bones breaking. Barb arrives home and sees Kevin split in half on the floor, blood everywhere, and the whole room destroyed. Without thinking twice, she runs upstairs to see how the boy is, and finds him in bed dressed as Dracula. Joe asks her to sit with him because Barb arrived just in time for the grand finale. The woman asks what happened, and JoJo says some friends came to visit and had to do some cleaning. After all, it was cleaning day, and opens his mouth, revealing real vampire fangs. His aunt screams, and so our story ends, with a close-up of the boy's shelf and the victim split in half at the feet of his two toys. Case 2. Broadcast television of the dead. This tale begins with two children watching broadcast TV. The show they're watching is called Miss Bookberry's Magic Library. After finishing a story, she asks her puppet Henrietta about the theme of the book, and the puppet replies that it was about getting what you deserve. The woman goes on to say that this is called karma. If you do something good, good things happen. But if you do something bad, the mascot shouts that something bad will happen, and the woman wraps it up by asking the children to be good, and then the commercials roll. We move to the show's studios where the crew asks Bookberry to do a promo telling parents to join the channel's family, but she does so in a completely rude way, ending the sentence with a "few at." Then they ask for a second take, and this time the woman does it right. As soon as she finishes, she removes the puppet and rudely says she needs to go to the bathroom. Claudia, the station manager, follows her down the hallways where the show's star demands the 3 p.m. time slot, but the manager explains that it would be complicated because she'd have to cancel Love and Painting, a show that's been on air for 10 years. But Bookberry says she doesn't care and threatens to report the manager's work to the higher-ups, slamming the door in her face. She goes to the location where the painting show is filmed, and we see that Norman, the host, is a talented painter creating a beautiful scene. As soon as filming ends, Claudia tells Norman and the producer that she'll have to cancel the show. The man is very sad, but just asks if he could record one last episode to say goodbye. Impressed by his calm, she asks her producer, George, why he didn't curse and shout. After all, he lost his job, and he says that Norman was on the front lines of the Vietnam War, must have done and seen horrible things, and since then, always keeps his peace of mind. On another set, an antiques appraisal show introduces the day's catalog, a snowblower, an ancient sword, and a jar of coins. The camera takes us to the host, Goodman Tappert, who says that today's guest, Ted Raimi, brought something unprecedented, an old book sealed with a padlock. Ted explains that he found it in his basement. It had been in the family for years, and he came to see if it was worth anything. Goodman asks for the key, opens the book, and some bizarre sighs come out of it. As soon as he starts reading, he's stunned. He says it's the Necronomicon, considered the most dangerous book in the world, a clear reference to Lovecraft, and the name Raimi directly references the director of the first Ash vs. Evil Dead. He goes on to explain that any museum would pay $400,000 for a copy, and that he knows a bit of Sumerian. Goodman then starts reading the incantations, making the book glow, illuminating his face, and making the lights flicker. As soon as he finishes reading the spell, Ted is possessed by the book's demon and sticks the book's key into Goodman's forehead, scaring several crew members. The creature levitates and says everyone must make an oath to the book. On the Love and Painting set, Norman paints another picture. When he finishes, he turns to the camera and thanks the viewers, but is interrupted by Ted, who arrives ordering them to give up their souls. The producer tries to stop him but is thrown aside with a single slap. Ted goes after Claudia, saying she has a very beautiful soul, but before he can get close, Norman sticks a paintbrush in his head. The creature just pulls it out and keeps standing as if nothing happened. Norman rolls up his sleeves, revealing his battalion tattoo, and tells the demon that if he doesn't behave, he'll expel him. The demon tries to attack but receives a series of punches and is thrown to the ground. When Norman sees the creature is about to get up, he steps on a board and throws paint remover into his hand. He fills his mouth and lights a lighter, spitting a jet of fire at the monster and setting its face ablaze. The creature screams and falls to the ground. Norman helps George get up, and Claudia asks where the nearest exit is so she can warn the others and find a phone. Norman replies that it's through the magic library. In the dressing room, Bookberry is drinking and getting ready. Her puppet is possessed by the demon and starts talking to her as if it were her father, belittling her and saying that he and her mother would be very disappointed if she didn't do that night's show because all of Chicago would be watching, and that was their chance to get out of there. Bookberry promises she won't do anything wrong. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. The woman asks to be left alone, but opens after much insistence. As soon as she opens, she is attacked by Ted, who shouts for her to give her soul to the book and finishes her off. Meanwhile, the trio reaches another filming set and see a real massacre, bodies and blood scattered everywhere. Norman notices the cameras are still filming, and Claudia asks George to check the recordings to see what happened. The producer accesses the cameras and finds Goodman reciting the spell. In parallel, Bookberry gets up, possessed by the book's entity. George says he found something and throws the images on the screen, on the monitors, and as soon as Norman hears that the powers of the dead were in the book, he orders the video to be stopped. The man says that hearing the spells will not help at all, so Claudia comes up with the idea of finding the book and locking it away, because if the book started all of this, it should also end it. But they wonder where it could be. The question is quickly answered when Goodman, also possessed, knocks over a set sign and orders everyone to take the oath. Seeing that the two of them stood no chance, George turns up the amplifiers and deafens the creature. But this has the same effect on Norman and Claudia. However, the noise scares the creature away, which screams that everyone there must obey the book and die, running off and disappearing with the scriptures. The two go upstairs to see if George is okay and thank him for the backup. On the televisions there, they notice that the channel's programming continues even though the entire crew is dead. Claudia says that at 6 p.m., Bookberry comes back on air. The three look at the clock, which shows exactly 6 p.m. At that moment, the show starts, and we see Bookberry completely deformed, telling the children to give their souls to the book. George says that if they read the spell on TV, the world would be lost, but Norman comments that this will never happen and leaves, followed by the other two. On the set of the Magic Library, the creature begins to read the book surrounded by the other possessed people. But before it can finish, the jar of silver coins is smashed on the floor, drawing the monster's attention. Claudia appears and says she is responsible for the quality of the show and did not approve of that program. At that moment, Norman uses the snowblower on the glass and coins on the floor, turning the machine into a kind of machine gun, shooting the monsters with silver coins and making the demons fall. George asks Claudia to grab the book, but as soon as she approaches, she is stopped by Bookberry. Ted gets up and knocks out George, and Goodman holds Norman from behind. Out of patience with everything happening, Claudia draws the sword and cuts off the creature's head. But even so, the attack does not stop, as Henrietta, the show's puppet, begins to recite the spell along with Bookberry's still-living head. Claudia shouts for Norman's help, who strikes Goodman and pulls the key from his forehead. He goes after the puppet, grabs the book from its hand, then kicks it through the set window and locks the book, defeating the monsters. With the battle won, he sits in the chair to catch his breath, and the lights go out. On another day, Norman is painting in his studio. Behind the cameras, Claudia tells George that the directors want love and painting on national TV because they thought Bookberry's decapitation was some marketing stunt. And she makes a joke saying it was karma helping them. And so our story ends with a zoom out from the TV, and we see that two children have been infected and possessed by the book. And we don't really know what happened to them. So guys, what was your favorite story in this episode? Tell me in the comments. And if a doctor discovered a miracle formula for everyone to magically lose weight, would you take this treatment? Want to know what happens to those who went through this procedure? Then click here on this video, or take the opportunity to watch other suggestions here from Resumindo Films. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.